Guys, I just want to talk a minute about Bobcat safety, and then most of this is going to be just a refresher on hooking a trailer to a truck and why we do it the way we do it, and then also tying down the Bobcat, just because just about all of us crews use Bobcats at some point during the year. So real quick on the Bobcat, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this machine weighs just over 13,000 pounds. So it weighs twice as much as most of our vehicles that we drive, and more importantly, it can pick them up and set them somewhere 14 feet high. It'll lift, well, this year I lifted about 4,500 pounds off the back of the truck with it. So it is very powerful, and you can do a lot of damage with it in a hurry if you're not careful. One of the biggest things about this is you have a lot of butt swing. So if you look at it from the side and you see where the driver sits inside, you sit in the very middle of the machine. So when you're driving, you have just as much hanging out behind you as you do out in front. So if you're tied up against a building and you go to zero turn, your butt end, as you can tell, will swing around and hit whatever you're right next to. So keep that in mind. Also, if there's a machine running on a site for helpers who are on the ground, it's very limited visibility in there. So whoever's running that machine isn't going to see you wandering up behind it or standing next to it when they're doing work. So always be sure, if you need the attention of the person who's running this machine, be sure that they see you when you're coming to them. Whenever you're running this machine, if you have other people with you on the job, you should always have a spotter on the ground, watching for lines that you may dig up, watching for traffic coming on the street, watching for a homeowner that doesn't know any better that needs to tell you something that comes prancing out their front door. And then you don't want to come in contact with any of that stuff, obviously. So anytime you're running a machine, if at all possible, have a spotter on the ground. Run it on the ground and be sure it's actually latched. A couple years ago, I was loading the forks into the back of the truck, and they weren't completely secured, and they popped off, dropped down on truck 15, ripped the tailgate off. About killed Trey. So just always kind of check and double check, but like I said, most importantly, if at all possible, have a spotter on the ground watching for you. By far the most dangerous thing we do every day is get in a truck and leave the shop, especially pulling a trailer, especially pulling something that weighs as much as a Bobcat. Every single step to hooking up a trailer could kill you or somebody else if it's done wrong. And if you were like me, you always think that'll never happen to me. So I printed off a picture, 3 of them, we'll just pass them around so everybody can see. About a month ago, I was pulling this Bobcat on this trailer, and I had a complete hitch failure with trailer separation while going down the road. So I just want to talk for a minute about how to avoid that and what to do if it happens, because I always thought, yeah, that's something you see on YouTube, it'll never happen to me. Well, that quick, it happened to me. And fortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of damage. This is called a pintle hitch. It's different from a ball hitch that a lot of the cover trailers are. This can handle a lot heavier load, a lot more weight, but it's also a much rougher ride because it doesn't sit snug like a ball hitch. This has movement with it, so anytime you hit the brakes, you're going to get a jolt. Anytime you hit the gas, you're going to get a jolt. So I'm just going to go through the steps real quick. Right here, I already cranked the hitch all the way up. Be sure that your boot is all the way up and secure. Before I worked at WLM, I was pulling a trailer. It was a dump trailer, and I didn't have the boot completely secure. And it dropped down a few inches while I was pulling it and caught some railroad tracks, ripped the jack off, ripped the hoist controller and stuff off the front of the trailer. Just that quick as I went over the tracks, it catches it. So I speak a lot from experience because I've made about every mistake there is to make. And it latches, this release, it latches tight. Always be sure your pin is snug in here. That is where my issue was a couple weeks ago when the trailer came detached. This pin that was here either broke off and disappeared, or it was late in the day and it was a long week and I didn't have it securely latched, just a moment of negligence, something like that. Okay, but that pin disappeared, and now even when this pin isn't in here, this is still latched down, but if you hit a good bounce, a good bump, and that pops up and it pops open, off goes the trailer. That's what happened to me. I was in front of Zimmer Building 5, went over some railroad tracks, and the stars aligned. My pintle popped open, off with the chains. These have a very, very specific purpose to avoid whenever your trailer comes detached, it doesn't go across the lane and go into somebody's house or into somebody's car as they're coming at you. There is a very specific way to put these on. You'll see the chains cross whenever I hook them up. And if you look in that picture, the reason for that is whenever this, God forbid, this trailer breaks off, the trailer will drop down and land on these chains and keep the front end of the trailer from hitting the ground. Okay, and you'll see in the picture, fortunately the rest of the trailer was hooked up right. The tongue of the trailer is resting on those chains, not dragging on the ground. You'll also notice that the hooks I hooked from the bottom and not from the top. Nowadays it's not too bad. They're too big of a deal because they have these clasps on them, but a lot of times these will be bent or broken or non-existent. The reason you hook from the bottom is in the event of a breakaway, this trailer is going to pull up real tight like that. So whenever it pulls tight, this chain pulls tight, the momentum of the chain is going to pull from down up, which means you want the chain hooked this direction so the chain goes down up and it hits on the back of that chain there. There's no way for that chain to pop off. If the chain was hooked the other direction and there was no clasp on it to close, whenever it pulls tight, it could pop that chain right off of there, and then they're pretty much useless.
When you're crossing your chains, you only want one cross, okay? The more you like keep twisting them together, you're shortening that length of catching space. So if your chains are too long, they're still dragging in that kind of position, you want to twist your chains and make them shorter. So
by twisting it, you can shorten the heck out of it.
Don't cross them and then twist them.
Don't shorten too much though, when you turn.
Right.
yeah.
Be sure it is in snug. Whenever you put it in, you'll notice all your electric lines have a little lip on there, and that catches. So whenever you put it in, if it's in the whole way, you give it a little tug, it's not going to come out. But that's why we also check lights and such.
I just say, if you're the one pulling a trailer, you're the one responsible for this. You might not be the one to hook this up in the morning, but you're still responsible for this. So check it twice, 3 times before you leave. However, I walk by my trailer every morning about 6 times and I look at it every time to make sure. And usually I'm the one that hooked it up.
Always use the buddy system.
But yeah, always make sure, and it's just better to double and triple check.
Loading the machine on the trailer and how to tie it down. Whenever you load this machine, it is very important to be sure it's parked in the right place front to back because of weight distribution. Whenever you're pulling a trailer, you want about 10% of the weight on the back of the truck. If you have too much weight on the tongue, you're going to squat the back of the truck down, take a lot of weight off the front wheels, and it's going to give you really bad trailer sway, hard to control. If the machine is too far to the back, if you have too much tail weight behind the trailer, you pull up on the tongue on the back of the truck, and you take weight off the rear wheels of the truck, and you really get into a tail wag the dog situation where you have major trailer sway. And any gust of wind or a semi passing you on 30 or bumps in the road, it could really send you for a ride. The front of the tracks on the Bobcat to just behind this D-hook here, that gives you about proper weight distribution. Most of the weight over top of the tires and about 10% on the back of the truck. If you can't see that when you're loading the machine, have somebody on the ground watch and make sure you stop where you need to stop. You'll see he puts the bucket way up in the air so he can see what he's doing and so he doesn't rip the fenders off the trailer. He put the hoist all the way down, flattened the bucket down, because whenever we attach the chains to this machine, we're going to attach them here to the hoist. So if the hoist was in the air at all, as you're driving, hydraulic pressure is going to release, and that hoist is slowly going to settle down, and then suddenly your chains are loose. I had it all the way down so that whenever he pulled on, it automatically latched. This is very important. Don't forget to put this pin back in, because the last thing you want is going down the road and God forbid something happens and the trailer goes. 2 in the rear and 2 in the front. Tying this machine down, it's a little bit different from the 300, but the same concept. With this machine, we can get 6 points of contact whenever we tie it down. You want to have the chains in the rear pulling backwards, the chains in the front pulling forwards. That way you have a lot of tension on it. If both chains are pulling backwards, then as you hit bumps, that machine is slowly going to scoot backwards, and then suddenly your chains are loose and you have an unsecure load. Same with if you have all your chains kind of pulling forwards. So nice long boom. So you'll see what Trey did on this side. This chain sits right in this knuckle, not up here on these hydraulic rams, because if you put tension on it, you can damage the ram there. Down through the D-hook and then back up onto the hoist. Okay, so there's a point of contact here, a point of contact here. We'll do the same on this side with this binder. Yeah, I got you. You'll notice that whenever I go to put the binder on, I've got a lot of slack in my crank. If your binder, you go to put it on, you only have a little bit of slack, you've only got an inch of room to tighten it down. To be Hercules. If you sit here and just keep cranking on it, with the way this tilt trailer is built, you're just going to bend the trailer. So just get some tension on it. And whenever you really feel it kind of start to tighten up, you're good. It cannot work its way loose as you're driving. If I left this binder just kind of sitting like this as I drive, it can work its way loose and around. So always secure it against something. Safety chains on the truck, whenever we hook them up, whenever you hook your chains on your D-hooks, hook them from the bottom like this. Okay, don't hook them from the top, they can come loose from the bottom. Always hook them from the bottom. And again, binders have a lot of slack. Pull it as tight as you can. You'll see, since I had mine on first, as Trey cranked his, whenever you could actually, if you really cranked on these, you could slide the Bobcat back with them. You could get a lot of leverage and a lot of torque on there. So I had mine cranked on, which pulled the Bobcat back a little bit. So when Trey cranked his on, it pulled it back a little bit more, which could put a little bit of slack in mine. So after he tightened his, come back over to the original one, give it another crank, and again, take the binder all the way around to the left side, let it sit. That way it can't come loose. So right now, if you look at it, these chains obviously are pulling backwards. And this point of contact right here is pulling forwards. Right now, this machine is about as snug as it's going to get. And again, you don't over tighten it, because you're attaching onto this loose end of the back of the trailer. And if you just keep cranking it, you're just going to bend the trailer up, which isn't going to be great. Pull that pin and release that lever.
Trailer's different. I found that when you're pulling it on, if the middle of your Bobcat or the middle of your tracks, basically right in the middle of where your axles are, it's basically centering your whole weight, because all your weight is being supported by those axles right there. So if you pull onto there and it's lined up with the middle of where your axles are, then it should be evenly front to back.